Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabriel Vega, and Laurie asked me to be a guest speaker, but I will be having class that evening, so we did a video. So I just wanted to share my story and a little bit about myself and my journey with experiencing chronic homelessness. So to start, I am a graduate student in the third year. I study clinical mental health counseling with a concentration in substance abuse, and I'm going to be working with gentlemen from 13 to 20 years old with various issues dealing with substance abuse and mental health. And in this third year, I also work at the Writing Center. For those of you who have already worked with me, thanks for stopping by. But it's my third year here as a graduate assistant and assistant director this third year. It's been an amazing journey, and I've just been very fortunate to be in grad school and to be able to say that to you because actually October 25th, 2011, this time of year, I was in a homeless shelter and I had just received enrollment email from my undergrad. Now, my undergrad it was Franklin Pierce University. I did a double major there in English and mass communications. And during those years, I was experiencing chronic homelessness. I was going from couch to couch, holidays. There was just a lot of tension at home, and the reason why there was a lot of tension at home was because I had come out of the closet. I had embraced who I was and started living authentically my truth as a gay man, and that didn't sit well with a lot of people. So holidays and things like that during college, a lot of people do go home and they have that routine. I didn't have that routine. I didn't have anywhere to go. I was in New Hampshire for the first time at Franklin Pierce University. I didn't really have a lot of resources here while I was trying to navigate a lot of those complications during breaks. And I tried transferring schools, hoping that maybe what I was experiencing might get easier in a different setting. And that wasn't what happened. I realized the grass isn't always greener on the other side when you transfer schools. And I ended up having to drop out of school for a little bit. I was a sophomore. I thought that I had everything figured out, and I was trying out new medications to deal with things like depression and things like that, and they really weren't helping me with classes, and I couldn't show up. I couldn't function. I was just too worried about when I was going to eat and how much money I was going to have for gas to get from A to B and things like that to really, focus on what was needed as a student. And what's interesting now that I'm in my program, I'm starting to learn, why it was so hard for me. Experiencing homelessness in New Hampshire. New Hampshire gets one of the last funding in the states for things like shelters and detox centers and things like that for substance abuse in our country, in our state. And that's why we're in a crisis right now, because we are like trickle effect funding, and there's just an overflow of people without services for shelters. Or just any services you need to kind of connect you back with the community when you do experience homelessness. And where I ended up homeless was Keene, New Hampshire. And I was Googling how to be homeless 101 survival guide. I had to leave my apartment at one point when I dropped out of school in New Jersey, and I came back to Keene because that was the last place I was. That was just the last place I could think of while I was dealing with a crisis to come back to. And to get into the shelter, what's interesting in New Hampshire is a lot of people prep really early in the hospitals and shelters when it's getting cold. They have been there for a lot longer than some people that it kind of just happens. And by the time that I started calling in October, these shelters were full. So here I am. I dropped out of school. I have no money. I barely have gas. I'm not making my car payments. I'm couch surfing some more while I'm calling this social worker day by day trying to get a bed somewhere in New Hampshire. And she finally got me a bed in Keene. So that's where I ended up. And I left Jersey, packed all my things, quit my job that day and said I need to leave an unsafe situation. I'm really sorry. This is unprofessional. Never thought in my life that all these things would be happening while I'm trying to become a professional and grow up and move through a lot of the things that are difficult for a lot of us. And the shelter was pretty intense. I wrote an article called Saying Yes to Rock Bottom when I did journalism in my undergrad. It was a way to kind of show people the reality of our situation right now, not just in New Hampshire. Just so you know, before I continue with my story of experiencing homelessness, Right now, 44% I think was a statistic that what makes up our homeless community are families. So it's not just me and a lot of LGBT people who are getting kicked out of their homes and who are seeking the streets to be safer, but it's families like the ones that you see on the commercials. The happy people that are trying to just move forward with their life are also struggling for food. They're struggling for housing. They're struggling to pay off their loans and other things that are just complications of how our system works with education and how our funding works and services work across the country. So it's not just the story doesn't just resonate with me, but it resonates with a lot of families, and it's not necessarily always about enabling, especially because it's an epidemic. It's something that's really a public health issue right now that we're trying to figure out in our states. When I got to the shelter, I did not expect what I was going to encounter. It was supposed to house 20 men. There were 23 of us because they try to help people like me who just need a place to stay. They gave me a fold-up cot in the corner of a bedroom with 3 other roommates. Now, my 3 other roommates were suffering from a lot of trauma, a lot of just complications of already being in that shelter for a long time. So when I would fall asleep, I'd wake up with some of them asleep next to me on a chair because they couldn't even, get up from being so intoxicated trying to cope with not only their addiction, but a lot of other mental illnesses that go along, comorbid things that go along with addictions and homelessness and all those things like being hungry and all that. And you had to be up by, like I think 7 a.m. and have your bed made. You needed to do your chores, and as a new person, my chore in the shelter in Keene, New Hampshire, was to clean the bathrooms. So bleach was my best friend, and it was terrifying, to be honest. It was just like I didn't tell my parents because I was having such a rough relationship, and there was so much self-hatred from the things that LGBT people see on TV and around them that I almost believe that I deserve this, that I gotta, just gotta get through it. That was my first mistake because it was so intense being there, and I learned in class from a woman that works in Voices Against Violence in New Hampshire. They have an office here in Plymouth. She was talking to me about some of the complications of getting the shelters together to get like formal training on handling people of like LGBT or just people who are different in shelters that have a lot of people dealing with emotion, stress, poverty. How do you manage that? How do you help them without hurting them some more? And she just says it's really hard to get people on the same page in New Hampshire because it's a high turnover rate to be a volunteer manager. And my volunteer manager was out of jail, and he volunteered because it kept him out of jail. So he had an amazing reason to try to like reinvent his life and help us there. But I'm really not sure if he was prepared for someone like me in a shelter full of men who are from a completely different generation, different background. I'm from New Jersey, and I'm in college in New Hampshire at that point. I'm not really integrated fully into the state. And my first dinner at the shelter, the manager said to me, so, and mind you, this is my first meal in days that I finally get this bed and I'm in this shelter. I drove from Massachusetts on my last tank of gas. And he goes, are you haha funny gay? And he puts his hand like this. And I'm in front of my roommates. I'm in front of a lot of gentlemen, pretty scary gentlemen. And I said, yes, I am. And he goes, well, you might want to keep that to yourself because people don't like different around here. And I was shocked. And I kind of nodded because I didn't really know what to say. Felt unsafe already. I was hungry. I just wanted to eat at the same time too. And it just really struck me that people aren't really trained or prepared. This is kind of such a big crisis that there's a lot of holes and a lot of casualties in the people that should be able to come to these services and feel safe but aren't. And when he told me to be careful with who I am, he also said in front of my roommates, boys, guess you can't sleep on your stomachs anymore. And these are men who are already, they probably have a lot of stuff in their life that they're confused about and angry about. And he just made me into this sexual predator when that was never my intention. I'm just trying to find somewhere to sleep right now because I have nowhere to go. And that was really something for me. That was when it kind of hit me that I need to survive this. I need to find another way out, and I need to go. I thought this was going to be my place to kind of wait till I get back into school, but I couldn't. So every day I did my chores. Every day I left at 8 a.m. Every day you had to be in by 9 or you lost your bed. No exceptions. It was kind of a way to manage so many people kind of breaking rules and stuff like that. And we even had people there with schizophrenia. So another aspect of people who are homeless, where you're wondering, oh, I'm wondering if I should help them, or I'm wondering if I should be afraid of them. There's a lot of people who are being victimized and dehumanized. There was a man there with schizophrenia who he ran out of insurance, and he ran out of his medication, and they gave him a couch in the shelter just because he was in the streets roaming, being victimized and hurt. And but he did have some really interesting delusions, and one of them is he thought people were trying to be aggressive with him when they weren't because of so much trauma. And I remember him standing next to me saying, stop all that gay shit, and I wouldn't be doing anything. I'd be standing next to him in the shelter, trying to mind my own business, and being like, oh, well, I am in a real sticky situation right now. So that was kind of what I was in, and starting to realize, like, you really don't plan it. Never say never, because you really don't know who is going through it. One thing I learned, that it's very dangerous to seem homeless. You got to really pretend. You got to try to stay clean for your job interviews, and that's really hard. Finding your resources to always have food and water for things like, grooming yourself and being presentable for the society that you're trying to interact with. And I didn't think of any of that. I just thought, people on the streets, they need to get their stuff together. They need to, I don't know what's going on. And then I realized, whoa, it's much more complex than that. And I know your class talks a lot about, enabling panhandling and things like that. And I think before you get too focused on that, we need to look at our system and how much it's not just drug addicts that are in the streets, but it's college students. It might be someone sitting next to you right now in this class while you watch this video. It might be them soon in a holiday when a crisis happens. You never know who is experiencing it, and it's no favorites right now across the United States. So what I tell people is, if you're afraid of passing someone in the streets, or you're afraid of someone who you perceive as homeless, and you're worried about giving them money or needing to do this and what they're going to do with that, maybe first start about thinking about eye contact. It's really dehumanizing hanging out in shelters and things like that, because people don't want to look at you. They don't want to be by you. They don't want to know your story. You're almost like this thing you can catch. And it's so hard, because if I just dress a certain way and look a certain way, people would never know. But when I'm in that situation, people know, and it's almost like you're taken advantage of. Like you're the scum of the streets. So just things like smiling, saying, how are you? Have a wonderful day. I hope you stay safe. Looking someone in the eye and genuinely just interacting with them without having to worry what they want from you, because they're always worried of when someone's going to hurt them. And that's what I was worried about. I was worried about being hurt, and I had to do a lot of things to survive. And, after the manager said that in front of people, there was a lot of people pressuring me and trying to sexually assault me in this shelter because of the way he handled that, thinking he was trying to protect me by saying, don't be yourself. But in fact, he kind of sent the message that it is dangerous. And that's when I started to realize that I need to do something. And October 27th is today, and October 25th, 2011, I remember applying and getting an email from the woman in residential life saying I got readmitted. I transferred school to Keene, dropped out, ended up in the shelter, got readmitted, got a second chance. And I said to myself, if I get a second chance, I want to give back. I want to send the ladder down. I want to figure out how we can change that so that my experience doesn't have to be the usual story. And I started doing journalism because I started being able to publish articles. I was able to ruffle a lot of feathers and get a lot of truth out. And I started studying the power of telling people's story, getting the truth out to those that need it the most. And like this video, I feel like getting the truth out and telling my story is a part of the healing and a part of the process of our country moving forward, and having really hard conversations that this is a public health issue, that there are many families and individuals and couples and people that are dealing with this. And I got that email, and I remember that I was using the Wi-Fi in Elm City Brewery, where they sell like wings and they have like a lobby. I didn't have internet. My laptop was falling apart. and my car was in default at that point, and they were looking for me to take my car. So there's a lot of things happening, and I was like, something's got to give. And I got that email, and I was like, all right, this is it. Got back into school, started writing, I started working again. And the people who took chances, the people who didn't know whether I was a drug addict, who didn't know whether I was something that they should take risks on, they did. And they didn't give me their all, because there was a lot of friends and people who just had to really set those boundaries, like, this is what I can do, but this is as far as I can go. And I used to be angry about that because I didn't understand how hard it is and how complex it is and how many resources it takes to help someone when they are in crisis like this. And now, after finishing my undergrad, I am in grad school. I have straight A's. I have an apartment. I have car insurance. I have my car paid off finally. I paid $13,000 off of that car after being chronically homeless for 5 years. And it's been a journey to realize that as much as it is a big issue and it is scary and it is a daunting task we have as a community to come together, there are plenty of us coming out of this very resilient. And if you are someone that might be watching this video and struggling and wondering what's next, embracing that unknown and embracing that never say never, and saying yes to rock bottom, and being able to know that you can be a survivor like me, that's what I'm trying to accomplish by telling my story, showing people that you can make a difference. By just being you, by being authentic, and by speaking your truth, and by following your passions, despite not really knowing if you're going to succeed. And that takes a lot of courage, and courage isn't the absence of fear. It's a cliche quote, but it's true. You feel the fear and you do it anyways, and that's what I did in that shelter. I got back in, I got housing, and I'm lucky that there's people who put their jobs and who put their resources on the line to allow me space to be safe, or to even just have a moment to be looked in the eye and be treated decently and be asked how I'm doing. So I can say, I'm having a really hard time, but thank you for asking. And because you asked, I feel a little bit more human, and I think I can get through this for one more day. And now I'm finishing my third year, and I actually am going to be a counselor on a farm, helping gentlemen from 13 to 20 years old who are suffering from homelessness, neglect, abuse, trauma. And I will be a positive role model and a person that they can talk to and be understood and helped and taught how to get a second chance. It's an alternative high school in a residential place where we do rope swings, adventure therapy. We teach them how to cook, how to do their chores, their laundry, and to get back into society instead of being another casualty. And that's just such a gift to be able to share with you all, because I didn't even know if I was going to be able to eat for many times, and here I am, and I'm able to get out of that, and I'm able to share with you that it's much more complex than enabling, and much more complex than drug addiction. And even if someone did have a drug addiction and they used your resources to get high, there's a lot more now that I'm learning for substance abuse treatment, that we have to watch that fine line of punishing and helping, and it's much more complex. People with addiction aren't necessarily morally indecent. They don't have a weakness. It's much more biological, and much more things that we're learning about the brain and the reward center and dopamine and things that are used for survival that are rewired for substances. So I think there's another factor there that you must think about, and think a little bit more with a broader sense, open mind of what might be happening with someone. You can't ever assume. And I hope that just by me sharing my story, that you would be confident and looking someone in the eye, and not having a lot of labels or worries, and just being there in that moment, asking them how they are, giving them a smile, or giving them a ride somewhere, or food, or asking them if they need something, or volunteering. You could be the person that volunteered during the holiday that really gave someone inspiration to keep going and to make a difference like I did. So just keep an open mind, an open heart. Thank you for giving me the time to tell my story. If you have any questions, you can always come see me at the Writing Center. We can talk a little bit more about my experience. I'm very open about what I've been through. And I am now still advocating for LGBT. I still do a lot of things like Diversity Institute, where we train professionals across a lot of different things. I did the Graduate Research Society for the last 2 years to try to find out more research on how to help homeless people and end homelessness. And we could always use more people in the front lines, helping us. So I hope you all have a wonderful night. I hope you have a wonderful exam and end of your evening. And I hope that if we cross paths on campus and you remember who I am, just say hello. And I hope that you learned a lot and got a lot from this class because Laurie is an amazing professor. And thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening.